So on March 18th of this year, at approximately 11 o'clock in the morning, officers responded to the 7800 block of Bodkin View Drive in Pasadena. A 911 call was placed from a member of a medical rehabilitation facility who stated they were on the phone with an individual later identified as Mr. Leonard Papa, who made suicidal statements. Eastern District officers responded to the residence, made contact with Mr. Papa, who was armed with a loaded handgun. The situation rapidly unfolded, resulting in Corporal Brennan firing his service weapon, striking Mr. Papa. Officers then rendered medical aid until relieved by the Anne Arundel County Fire Department personnel, who later pronounced Mr. Papa deceased at the scene. Since the time of the incident, homicide investigators have conducted interviews. Chief Alwood will provide an update into the investigation. Chief.
Thank you, Sergeant. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me begin and preface my remarks with any time that there is a loss of life as a result of an officer-involved shooting, family is left to grieve, the community has questions and concerns, and our officers are left to process, the entirety of this tragic event. So preliminarily, the information we provided to you on the 18th, understand we were just a little over an hour into the investigation, so that's why the information was so limited. Corporal Brennan is the officer who discharged his firearm during this incident. He's a 7-year veteran of this police department, and he's a certified crisis intervention trained police officer. When our officers arrived at the home of Mr. Leonard Papa that morning, they knocked on the door and announced themselves. They received no answer, but found that the door was unlocked. Given the nature of the call to 911 and the information conveyed to them at that time, they'd been informed that Mr. Papa was possibly bedridden and had made statements of harming himself. The officers opened the door, announced themselves, and Mr. Papa responded for them to enter. They located Mr. Papa in a bedroom, seated upright in his bed, and began speaking with him. While speaking with Mr. Papa and assessing the situation, Mr. Papa mentioned that he had a handgun within his reach. Corporal Brennan then repositioned himself to get a better viewpoint and saw the handle of a gun protruding from between the mattresses in the bed. He drew his firearm and he ordered Mr. Papa to move away from the gun and not to touch the gun. Corporal Brennan ordered Mr. Papa several times to keep away from the gun and continued to attempt to de-escalate by reholstering his weapon. However, Mr. Papa reached for the gun. Mr. Papa grabbed the gun and raised the weapon. At that point, Corporal Brennan believed his life to be in imminent danger and discharged his weapon, striking Mr. Papa, once in the arm and once in the upper torso. The officer immediately retrieved his first aid kit and began to render first aid. Shortly thereafter, the fire department arrived and assumed first aid responsibilities. However, Mr. Papa succumbed to his injuries. Unfortunately, Corporal Brennan's attempts to speak with Mr. Papa throughout this engagement were unsuccessful. His attempts to de-escalate were unsuccessful. And oftentimes it's difficult to de-escalate a situation where a person has armed themselves. He made a very difficult decision that none of us, no police officer, ever wants to have to make. One 9mm handgun was recovered from Mr. Papa's person. And as is our standard operating procedure, Corporal Brennan was placed on administrative leave. We again offer our condolences to the family of Mr. Papa, and we ask for patience as we continue this investigation. And I know that Sergeant Cook mentioned today we have our crisis response system leadership here with us, Director Jen Corbin and Lieutenant Steve Thomas, to address any questions that you may have about our crisis intervention team.
Okay. At this time, we take any questions that you may have. That's correct. I'll get back to you with that information as far as the name of the facility. Just want to make sure it's accurate.
I don't know the specific date.
I'm not sure of the specific date. If you need the specific date, I can certainly look into it and get that information to you. No, that's an additional training that officers are able and volunteer for.
Can you speak more to the nature of that training? How many officers go through it? How long it takes? How often they do the training?
Sure, I'm gonna ask you to repeat that question a little louder, and if Lieutenant Thomas will come forward for that.
So it's a 40-hour training, hands-on training for officers. We actually do it in another location where it's really intimate. We haven't, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to do a training in a year. We're going to start back up again in May. We currently have 137 officers in the department trained in CIT. And it's in addition to academy training. In our academy, actually, you get that same level of training, but we don't call it CIT. We want officers to get field experience and be able to take the experience that they've learned from patrol and utilize it in the class to look back on situations and say, you know, I didn't do anything wrong, but maybe I could have done something better in this circumstance. So we bring in a lot of consumers, people we work with in the community that talk about their lived experience with mental illness and what helps and will de-escalate them, and also what escalates them. So it's the officers learn in that situation. We do a lot of hands-on training, as in we go through scenario bases the last day. And it's really so the officers then can display that they've been able to learn and apply what they learned in real life situations.
So in terms of, I'm not sure who this question should be posed to. In terms of this scenario though, I know you said the officer felt that his life was in danger. What led him to believe that? What did he say? Was the weapon pointed towards him? Can you elaborate on that?
I don't have the exact detail, and that's for the officer to articulate. However, we do know that at some point Mr. Papa raised the weapon and the officer had to make a critical decision in a very short split second.
It does raise questions though, because we hear an elderly man who was possibly bedridden, was in his bed. Somehow something escalated between the time the officer entered the room and then he was struck twice. So just trying to
Certainly.
those couple of minutes, however long it was.
Certainly. It's a situation that unfolded very quickly, escalated very quickly. The moment the officer saw the weapon, perceived the threat, he responded as he's trained to do. Yes, Mr. Papa is a 79-year-old man, and initially we were informed that he was bedridden, but that came from an independent third party. And as we've been informed, that was not the case. He was in his bed, however, he was not permanently bedridden.
What happens from here for the officer involved?
So once the investigation concludes, it's still ongoing, but once it does conclude, it'll be presented to the Office of the State's Attorney for them to review and for them to determine whether or not the shooting is justified or not justified.
So at this point, is he on any level of administrative leave?
Yes, ma'am, he's on administrative leave.
Lieutenant Thomas?
Yes, sir.
I would assume that
I mean, there's no way of knowing what led him to make the decisions. Not for, yes, the officer's reacting to what the person, the decisions that he made. And unfortunately, it's a very bad situation for officers to be in at times.
Lieutenant, help us understand, you do this training and have, I guess, experienced this live and through training. Help me understand, if a man, being my age, younger or older, and he has a gun next to him, I guess that would take him 10, 15 seconds to get it and bring it around, or is this a split-second decision?
Yeah,
How
it's.
often does this happen?
I wasn't there for this situation, but no, I mean, it's you can picture it yourself. Any situation, the time it would take for someone to utilize a weapon that they have access to, and it is a split-second decision that any officer has to make at that time.